Every curse has a beginning. Every haunted place has a first victim. And every waiting room was once just a door. Ward number 13 wasn't always a place of nightmares. It was built with the hope of saving lives. But over time it twisted into something that even death itself learned to fear. Adam had lost all track of time. In the suffocating confines of Ward 13, there was no day, no night, only the maddening flicker of dying lights and the endless, rhythmic beeping of unseen machines. He had tried screaming until his throat was raw. Silence was his only answer. He had tried running, only to find the corridor twisting back on itself. A cruel, architectural joke. He was a rat in a maze with no exit. But then, one day, something changed. A door appeared where there was none before. It wasn't the usual grimy, black door he was used to. This one was white. Stark, clean, and unnerving. And on it, a single word was written in plain black letters. Origin. With nothing left to lose, Adam pushed it open. He stepped into an old hospital room, a stark contrast to the decaying ward he just left. It was clean, brightly lit, almost normal. A man sat on a simple wooden chair beside a patient's bed. He was dressed in a doctor's uniform, but from a different era, maybe the 1940s. The man looked up as Adam entered. His face was calm, but his eyes held an exhaustion so profound it seemed to have settled into his very bones. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. Adam, still reeling from the sudden change, managed to ask, Who are you?" The man offered a faint, weary smile. "I am Dr. Samuel Gray, the first doctor of Ward 13. He gestured with his head towards the patient on the bed. It was a young girl, unconscious, connected to machines that looked ancient, like museum pieces. "She was my daughter," Gray said, his voice cracking ever so slightly. "Lila. She died during surgery, right here, in this hospital." Adam felt his own throat tightened, a knot of dread and pity forming in his stomach. Gray continued, his gaze fixed on his daughter. "I refused to accept it. How could I? I stayed in this room for 13 days. No sleep, no food, just me, the machines, and a desperate prayer that felt more like a demand." He paused, taking a shaky breath. And then, on the 13th night, the heart monitor. It beeped again. Adam whispered the word, not quite believing it. "She came back." Gray nodded slowly. "She was alive. But she wasn't my Lila anymore." As if on cue, the girl on the bed opened her eyes, and Adam saw that they were completely, utterly black, pits of empty space where a soul should have been. Dr. Gray then laid bare the terrible truth. In his grief-fueled refusal to accept death, he hadn't performed a miracle. He had created a prison, a space caught between the realms of life and death. It wasn't heaven, and it wasn't hell. It was a waiting room, a purgatory for souls who, for one reason or another, weren't ready to leave. But this new dimension had a terrible hunger. It needed a constant price to maintain its existence, and the price was more death. So, the room began to expand, to pull in others. First, the terminally ill patients from nearby rooms, then the doctors and nurses who worked tirelessly, surrounded by the specter of death. Anyone who spent too much time on the edge. "Ward 13 doesn't want to be evil," Gray said softly, his voice full of a sorrow that spanned decades. "It just wants company. It's lonely." Adam finally found his voice. "But why me?" Gray looked at him, and for the first time, Adam saw a flicker of recognition. "Because you're like me, Adam. You care too much. You hold on too tight. You couldn't let go of your last patient, could you?" Dr. Gray slowly pushed himself to his feet. His movements were stiff, as if he'd been sitting in that chair for a lifetime. "My time here is ending. The ward. It's becoming unstable without a conscious anchor. It needs a new one." The implication hit Adam with the force of a physical blow. Gray wanted him to take his place, to become the new warden of this soul trap. "If I leave," Gray explained, his voice pleading, "my daughter can finally rest. The connection will be broken. But someone must stay. Someone has to keep the door shut. Adam looked from the man to the black-eyed girl. He thought of the endless, looping corridors and the hundreds of trapped, whispering souls he had sensed. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Gray didn't answer with words. Instead, the monitors around the room flickered to life. They weren't showing heart rates. They showed images of hospitals all over the world. In each one, a door was materializing in a solid wall. The floor numbers on elevator displays were glitching, an extra 13 appearing and disappearing. New Ward 13s were being born. Adam understood with chilling certainty. This was no longer about saving himself. It was about stopping a plague from spreading across the globe. He had no choice. Not really. With a deep, shuddering sigh of resignation, Adam made his decision. He walked over and sat down in the now empty chair beside the bed. It was still warm. Dr. Gray placed a translucent hand on Adam's shoulder. The touch was cold, like a winter morning. "Thank you, Doctor." And then, the room began to fade. Gray and his daughter grew transparent, their forms dissolving like smoke. Just before she vanished, Adam saw the girl's eyes. The terrifying blackness receded, replaced by the soft, peaceful brown of a child finally at rest. Then, there was only peace. Silence. For the first time since he'd arrived, Adam was truly alone. The flickering lights in the corridor outside stabilized, casting a steady, calm glow. The cacophony of beeping machines died down, one by one, until the ward was completely quiet. Now, years later, when new doctors and nurses walk the halls of City General Hospital, they no longer hear the phantom screams from the long-abandoned East Wing. They don't feel the icy dread that once permeated the third floor. Instead, there's a strange, inexplicable calm, a feeling of being watched over, as if a silent guardian keeps the nightmares at bay, protecting the living from the things that wait in the dark. Ward number 13 still exists, but it no longer collects souls. It contains just one, and somewhere, in a quiet, forgotten corridor between life and death, a doctor still sits in his chair, keeping his lonely vigil, waiting so that the rest of the world doesn't have to.